Erickson was born on December 14, 1984 in St. Paul, Minnesota. She was the daughter of John and Linda Erickson and had two brothers, Peter and Joel. Heidi committed her life to Jesus Christ as a young girl and faithfully walked with him. She was described as a joyful child of God. She loved and was loved by her family and many wonderful friends. In 2005, Heidi met Nick Firkus at church, hit it off, and they got married soon after. Nick was born February 25, 1983, and is the son of Steve and Julie Firkus. Heidi found work at Securian, a financial services company, while Nick Firkus was the director of operations for a carpet cleaning business. Heidi and Nick Firkus were both close with their parents. In 2010, the couple had been dealing with financial difficulties and were about to be evicted from their home. They were in over $15,000 of credit card debt. Heidi knew none of this, however. Out of shame, Nick did not tell anyone about their financial situation. Early in the morning on April 25, 2010, at approximately 6:30, 25-year-old Heidi made a 911 call from her cell phone. She frantically said that someone's trying to break into their home. She could be heard breathing heavily and screaming. It was clear she was terrified. The call ended abruptly with a loud noise. Just 65 seconds later, another 911 call was made from their home, this time from her husband, 27-year-old Nick Firkus. "My wife is shocked. Someone broke into our house," Nick screamed into the phone. "I've been shot." When officers arrived at the scene, they found Nick with a gunshot wound to his left thigh. He was beside Heidi on the floor talking to the 911 operator. He was highly emotional and was taken to the hospital. Heidi had been fatally shot in the upper back. Her body was found in the kitchen. Investigators noticed that the Firkus house was clean and tidy, and the entryway table beside the front door was undisturbed. They could not find any signs of a struggle taking place or anyone that forced themselves into the house. Nick Firkus told Sergeant Jim Gray of the St. Paul Police Department that he awoke to a suspicious noise at his front door, grabbed his shotgun from the closet where he kept it for safety, and alerted his sleeping wife. Both of them were trying to run out the back door to the detached garage to escape. According to Nick, Heidi stopped next to the front door to grab her wallet, which was on the table next to the front door. At that moment, the door opened, and there was a guy around 6'1" or 6'2" with a dark hooded sweatshirt with the hood drawn tight around his face. Nick Firkus said that the guy grabbed the barrel of the shotgun. They wrestled and that his fingers slipped onto the trigger and it went off. The gunshot hit Heidi and she fell onto the floor. Nick Firkus and the intruder struggled over the shotgun and the gun went off a second time, hitting Nick in the leg. He fell down and the intruder took off through the front door. He told police that they were about to lose their house because they were behind on their bills. He said that they had not told any of their friends or family about the foreclosure or their need to be out of their house, but that they were going to tell their parents and friends and were planning to move later that day. According to him, they had planned to pack up their house on Sunday and Monday morning, put some of their belongings in the garage to get later, and find someone to stay with. Photographs and a video taken inside the Firkus home after the incident showed that despite having to be out of the house the next day, absolutely no packing had been done. Also, Heidi was scheduled to work on Monday, April 26th. She did not request the day off on Thursday, April 22nd. 2010, 3 days before her life was ended, Heidi exchanged text messages with a friend making plans to get a pedicure in the afternoon on Sunday, April 25th. In this exchange, Heidi was given the option of doing the pedicure on Sunday or the following Wednesday, and Heidi chose Sunday. She also suggested that they all go to church together that Sunday morning. It was evident that Heidi knew nothing about the eviction or that they had to move to a new place. Heidi's funeral took place at the Calvary Church in Roseville, Minnesota, a week after she lost her life. Many messages sympathizing with her parents, Nick, and their families streamed in. She was remembered as a beautiful young woman, and the community was deeply saddened. On her tombstone, the words "Joyful Child of God" are engraved. Extensive neighborhood canvassing and a canine search showed no sign of an intruder. He was never found. Investigators did note that Nick Firkus perpetuated several false accounts to them during interviews. He became a suspect in the case when the police found no signs of a forced break-in or any missing items. There were also no background noises that indicated there was an intruder or a struggle taking place. When investigators looked into the audio of the 911 calls made, investigators also found only Nick Firkus's DNA on the gun, and several witnesses testified there were no signs of a break-in. Nick Firkus's attorneys claimed the intruder was wearing gloves and was in the home for only a couple of seconds, so he could not have left. DNA evidence. Nick Firkus retained the services of a defense attorney, Joe Friedberg, who recommended he cease contact with the St. Paul Police Department at the advice of his lawyer. Nick Firkus declined investigators' request to sit down with a police sketch artist to create a composite of the alleged intruder. "I knew they had used that as a lever to try interrogating him more, so I said, no, we won't do that. but will hire an artist and do it," Friedberg told ABC News' Nick Firkus. And Joe Friedberg returned to the St. Paul's Police Department with their own sketch of the alleged intruder, who Nick Firkus said was a male in his late 30s, and wearing a hoodie. The police released the sketch through the media to see if any tips would come in. A woman identified Michael Pye to police as a potential match. Investigators started researching him immediately, and they learned that he was engaged in a pattern of breaking into homes in St. Paul around 6 in the morning. However, Michael Pye was incarcerated on the day of Heidi's slaying. Authorities subsequently cleared him of having any involvement in this case. A few months after Heidi's demise, Nick Firkus met Rachel Watson. She believed he was the man of her dreams. Rachel is described as a loving, caring, and generous individual who is always ready to extend a helping hand. She is also known for her kind and amicable behavior, which helps her maintain positive relationships with everyone around her. Also born in Minnesota, Rachel got to know Nick Firkus on a personal level through her sister Sarah and her brother-in-law David Olson, who were both close friends of Heidi. In fact, Sarah considered herself one of Heidi's best friends, and she was the one to insist that Nick Firkus was a wonderful man who loved and took care of his first wife without fail. Neither Sarah nor David minded when Rachel fell in love with him before deciding to tie the knot. The two got married in August 2012 and moved into a house purchased for them by Nick Firkus's parents. They welcomed their first child just a few months later. Neighbors who were acquainted with the couple claimed they appeared utterly in love, and they even went on to become proud parents of two more wonderful children. Yet with time, Rachel began doubting her husband's involvement in Heidi's case. Her suspicion about her husband's involvement with what happened to Heidi were raised when she found a notice that they might lose their home to foreclosure due to unpaid property taxes. Nick and Rachel Firkus had an arrangement where they would pay the mortgage amount to Nick Firkus's parents, and he would pay the property taxes directly to the county. She immediately thought of what she had heard about Heidi's demise. According to Rachel, "I didn't know that this was happening, and I'm living with this person. I have children with this person, and the last time he had problems with finances, a lot of things went wrong." She said in an interview she decided to confront him about it because she feared for her life as well. She sent their children away and even decided to record the whole conversation before talking to Nick. Although Nick Firkus said nothing incriminating while talking to his spouse, it was apparent he was hiding something. In one recording, Rachel said, "The fact that you're lying was so easy for you to do in front of me over and over and over makes me think that I could end my wife's life." He responded. She replied, "Yes." This worry kept nagging Rachel until she could not take it anymore and divorced him in 2019. Rachel told ABC's 2020 that catching Nick Firkus in a substantially similar lie was what led her to see the 2010 event in an entirely new light. In 2019, Sergeant Nicole Sipes of the St. Paul Police Department took a new look at Heidi Firkus's case. "The case always bothered me because the circumstances did not seem to fit what happened," Sipes said. Once Sipes learned of Nick Firkus's recent divorce from his second wife, she reached out to Rachel, who shared her suspicions she could have also been a victim. Sipes said in May 2021 Nick Firkus was arrested and for the first time officially charged with taking his first wife's life. The investigation showed Nick Firkus was served with foreclosure in June 2009 and their house was sold at a sheriff's auction in the same month. 10 months before Heidi was slayed, eviction proceedings had been filed in February and an eviction hearing was held on March 8, 2010, which Nick Firkus attended alone. The lockout date was originally set for April 9, 2010. Nick Firkus called the attorneys and stated his grandmother was in hospice and asked to move it to April 26. However, investigators found no evidence either of his grandmothers were in hospice or passed away in 2010. In a review of correspondence between the couple and financial documents found in the home, investigators were unable to find any proof that Heidi knew of the impending eviction. Nick Firkus's trial started in February 2022. Defense attorneys argued Heidi knew about the foreclosure and impending eviction. Prosecutors, on the other hand, said she did not know and her husband was desperate. Nick Firkus, the complaint said, had done absolutely no packing and kept Heidi completely in the dark about the fact that they were about to be evicted on April 26, 2010, which was one day after the slaying. Investigators have reviewed the text messages and emails sent to and from Heidi and Nick Firkus's cell phones and email accounts. There is not a single message that references foreclosure or eviction proceedings or gives any indication that they would need to move out of their house imminently. On the contrary, on March 11, 2010, Heidi sent an email to a friend saying, "Wish we weren't tied down to our house so we could move somewhere fun." The law firm handling the foreclosure And eviction has no documentation signed by Heidi, and their representatives never had any contact with Heidi. All their contacts were with Nick Firkus. Investigators have spoken with Heidi's family, friends, and co-workers, and not one person said that Heidi ever said anything about foreclosure, eviction, or needing a place to stay or store their belongings. In April 2010, Heidi emailed Nick Firkus multiple times regarding scheduling a meeting with a realtor who helped them buy their house and who was referred to as JS, and also a friend from church. Nick Firkus responded by saying that he had been in contact with JS on April 23, 2010. Heidi sent Nick Firkus an email asking whether he had heard from JS. Nick Firkus responded, JS said that he's ready to meet when we are. I told him Monday should be good. Police interviewed JS, who said that he had not spoken to Nick Firkus in over a year, and that there was no meeting scheduled for any Monday. The FBI also combined their ballistics testing and a virtual model of Heidi and Nick Firkus's house to prove that the shots were most likely not accidental. In the middle of the struggle, but deliberate. However, Nick Firkus's attorney countered that these findings did not necessarily disprove his version of the events. Finally, the prosecutor asked the big question: did you have anything to do with the incident in which Heidi lost her life? No, Nick Firkus said absolutely not. Ramsey County prosecutors argued that Nick Firkus hid details of their financial troubles from his wife and took her life due to the shame of their impending eviction. It wasn't just going to be the loss of his house, it was going to be the realization that he had lied to his wife, and he had lied to his friends. He had lied to the community for many years. Ramsey County Assistant District Attorney Elizabeth Lamon said he took Heidi's life and saved his reputation. Senior Assistant Hennepin County Attorney Rachel Cracker said at the trial where she aided Ramsey County prosecutors in securing the conviction, the trial lasted 11 days. On February 10, 2023, after 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Nick Firkus guilty of slaying Heidi. Robert Richmond, Nick Firkus's defense attorney, refuted these allegations, but nevertheless he was found guilty on all the charges against him. In April 2023, Firkus was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. It took more than a decade for this case to be solved, and it could very well have still been unsolved if Firkus was not caught in a big lie by his second wife, Rachel. Nick Firkus's family declined a request from ABC News for an interview, but issued a statement in support of him. He was wrongly convicted and sits in jail for a crime he did not commit. This is not just the belief of heartbroken parents. A part of the statement reads, after 13 years Heidi's family and friends found some sort of closure. They had this to say in a statement: because of the lies we were told as early as the day after her life was ended, along with the pressures to believe them, it has been virtually impossible to find closure to our grief as the shock begins after what happened to Heidi. The realization quickly set in that everything Nick Firkus was telling us betrayed who I knew. My sister to be Heidi's brother Peter Erickson said the fact that he had the audacity to peddle a story that was so obviously inconsistent with Heidi's character was, and still is, very much insulting and offensive to me and everyone else who actually knew and loved her. I really miss my sister, he added. Heidi's mom, Linda Erickson, holding back tears, said Nick Firkus's unthinkable actions robbed her daughter and loved ones of participating in that adventure of life with her. She looked forward to being a mother. She said of Heidi, because of Nick Firkus, I never get to see my friend again. Jesse Bain added, because of him, Heidi is missing out on so much at present. Rachel still resides in St. Paul, Minnesota, where she owns and operates her own cosmetics company, Be Lovely. On top of it, she is also a vocal advocate for victims of human trafficking. In fact, reports indicate that Be Lovely donates 10 of each sale to organizations that work for victims of trafficking and other social injustices. It honestly is great to witness Rachel's success. Nick Firkus is serving his life sentence without parole at the Minnesota Correctional Facility in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Sandy Point is a coastal town located in Victoria, Australia. It is situated on the southeastern coast of the country, near the entrance to the Gippsland Lake. Sandy Point is known for its beautiful sandy beaches, making it a popular destination for beachgoers and water sports enthusiasts. The area also offers opportunities for fishing, bird watching, and other outdoor activities. On Christmas Day in 2017, a snorkeler made a startling discovery at Shallow Inlet in Sandy Point. The snorkeler found human remains on the ocean floor. The remains were devoid of tissue, clothing, or personal effects. Remarkably, almost the entire skeleton was uncovered in a near-perfect condition beneath the sand, with no context or clues to the man's identity. Victoria Police reported the finding to the coroner and transferred the remains to the Victorian Institute for Forensic Medicine. As the team of experts began their scientific tests, they were able to infer Some characteristics of the unknown person. The forensic anthropologist determined that the remains belonged to a Caucasian male aged between 21 and 37 years who stood at approximately 170 centimeters tall. The forensic odontologist who delved into the dental restorations noticed that work done on the teeth hinted at the fact that the person lost their life a very long time ago or were not from Australia. The man's upper jaw was recovered, but not the lower jaw. Radiocarbon testing was not able to illuminate the timeline. It indicated a 95% probability that the individual lived between 1666 and 1942, which is hardly specific. A nuclear DNA profile and a mitochondrial DNA profile were obtained from the remains. The DNA profile information was compared to the Victorian missing persons DNA database, but no match was found. The DNA profile was also uploaded to the National Criminal Investigation DNA database for identification purposes with no match. Since he could not be identified, the man was named the Sandy Point John Doe. At one point, there was speculation that the remains could have been those of Martin Weiberg. Martin was a ship's carpenter aboard the SS Avoca, who in 1877 managed to steal 5,000 gold sovereigns that would be worth millions of dollars today. Martin was caught and arrested on October 29, 1878. He spent 6 weeks in custody and went to the Tarwin River to show police where the rest of the gold sovereigns were hidden. During the search, Weiberg punched one of the officers in the stomach and ran into nearby bushes. He managed to evade police capture for 5 more months. Weiberg met up with police again on a bush track near Eagle Point in Painesville, Australia. He was arrested, taken to Melbourne, and sentenced to 5 years of hard labor. Once released, Weiberg traveled to Hobart and purchased a yacht. He sailed the Oddback to Warrata Bay in Gippsland Park, the yacht, and rowed a small boat to shore to collect supplies. But when he tried to row back to the yacht, the weather turned bad. His small boat was found washed ashore the next day, and Weiberg is presumed to have drowned, but his body was never found. Of course, the only way of finding out if the remains belonged to Martin Weiberg would be modern DNA technology. The Victorian Institute for Forensic Medicine was determined to discover the identity of this unknown man. Recently, they embarked on a program to explore the use of forensic genetic genealogy to solve several Australian cold cases, including this cold case. Forensic evidence was sent to Othrum's laboratory in the Woodlands, Texas, and Othram scientists used forensic-grade genome sequencing to develop a comprehensive DNA profile. Once Othram developed the DNA profile, it was returned to investigators, who then uploaded the profile to genealogical databases. The investigative research resulted in a compelling lead that Sandy Point John Doe was Mr. Christopher Luke Moore, a Gippsland farmer and World War I veteran who was thought to have drowned in Warrata Bay in 1928. Enlisted for the war, aged 18, serving for more than 18 months for the 10th Field Artillery Brigade. Historic police and coronal documents revealed that Christopher was at Warrata Bay with his parents Cornelius and Charlotte, brother Francis, wife Elizabeth, and toddler Mary when he got into difficulty in the waves on December 30, 1928. A beachgoer tried to save him, but the tide was too strong. Cornelius Moore spent 10 long days searching the coastline for his son. Without success, unearthed historical records unveiled an interesting twist. Mere weeks after Christopher's potential drowning, a local Sandy Point farmer discovered a mandible at Shallow Inlet. Christopher's father, recognizing the distinct dental work, confirmed the mandible as his son's. The coronal inquest held on January 24, 1929, officially validated this identification. Recently, the Victorian Institute for Forensic Medicine's findings were shared with the state coroner. A possible grandniece of Christopher Luke Moore was identified residing in Gippsland, Australia. Police contacted this vital link to history, and she graciously cooperated, confirming the family's account of Christopher's drowning and the subsequent recovery and burial of his mandible. To establish an irrefutable familial connection, the grandniece provided a DNA sample. Through confirmatory DNA analysis, the truth was confirmed. Sandy Point John Doe was indeed Christopher Luke Moore. The discovery was made in July 2023. Based on the family's account, it is confirmed that Christopher accidentally drowned and no foul play was involved, thanks to the effort of the Victorian Institute for Forensic Medicine and Othram. A 95-year-old case has finally been solved.